this is my Bond Delete, and today, I've never done this before, today what I'm doing is I'm opening up the machine and I'm going to replace it with this sponge bar that I bought online. I'll leave the link to where I got the sponge bar in the about section of the video. Altogether there are 20 screws to remove, and they are quite tight. Once you get going they come out quite easily, so you need a Phillips screwdriver. So I'll just stop the video for a few minutes and take out all the screws. So that's all the 20 screws taken out, and I recommend always putting screws in a tray so you don't lose any. I'll just lift this plate up and we'll see what's under here. I have read about some people say that sometimes the sponge bars can deteriorate. Oh yeah, this is, you can see it's fallen apart a little bit. Okay. So I was hoping I'd just be able to pull it out, but that's not going to be the case. There's quite a bit of fluff here as well. So what I'm going to do now is the next part, I believe, is to take the needles out because they're going to be in the way. So that's the next part. I'm taking the needles out from either side, taking about 30 needles from either end, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the middle and put the needles that have been used more to the side to replace the needles. Also, when you're taking the needles out, you bring them all, I bring them all forward to position which is the furthest they can go down here. What you need to do is you need to make sure that your latch is closed when you're pulling it out. So what you do is you hold the nib bit and then you just pull it out. You may find that sometimes it's catching on the sponge. I'm finding that a few times. It's a case of putting your finger on the end of the needle, which in turn lifts the needle butt. You then take the needle butt and you pull it out straight. Make sure you're pulling it out straight and not at an angle. Now these needles are in pretty good condition actually, so I don't feel that I need to strip and oil them down. They look quite good. So I'll continue doing this and come back in a minute. All the needles have now been removed, and there's a few dirty marks on the plastic bed. So what I've done is I've let this baby wipe air dry just a little bit, just so that it's not going to soak water in. So I'm just going to take the baby wipe and I'm just going to give this a clean down just now. So that's the next thing before I turn it over to see what the sponge bar's like. That's me wiped the needle bed down with the alcohol-free baby wipe. So the next thing to do is to turn this over and see the state of the sponge bar. Now I'm expecting it, in all honesty, to be in bits, because the bits at the side were like just crumbling apart. And actually you can see here, just be careful when you're turning it over, because it's not got the metal plate at the back. The sections are coming apart a little bit. That's not too bad. So I'm just going to wipe my table down. There's a bit of dust here. I'll just dry my table. So sponge bar doesn't look too bad, but we'll see. We'll see if it comes off in one piece or not now. Oh. Okay, so it's actually not coming out in one piece. It's left a lot of sponge in there. I don't know if there's a bottom. No, it's all... So the sponge is totally disintegrated. So I'm going to have to peel this bit off and then get all this bit. You'll see here it's literally, it's loose. It's all just loose. So I'm going to scrape this off as best I can, and then I'll use a brush to get in, and I might even hoover it. We'll see how we go. But yeah, you can see it's just totally falling apart here. So the hoover didn't work, so I'm just taking a lollipop stick and I'm just dragging it along, and what I need to do is actually try and hoover it again. But yeah, the bits that are together, oh my goodness, it's just going everywhere. So yeah, hopefully if it's loose, the hoover will actually get it. Oh, goodness gracious. It's also, it's very sticky as well. So it's not very nice, to be honest. So yeah. So we'll try the hoover again and see if it's going to lift it up this time. Got it on high. So it's all pretty horrible. I got a majority of it out with the hoover, so the rest of it I'm just going to take a paintbrush and just take it out with a paintbrush. Use a hard bristled cheap paintbrush, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go like that and get as much of it as I can out and loosen it. So see, it's pretty horrible, but yeah. So you can see it's coming off like that. So I'll just keep going like that and brush as much as I can away from it. Okay, so I don't think there's an easy solution to this. As I said, mine was all falling apart, so the best thing to do is when you're taking it apart, to be careful and try and get it in big sections, and as I say, then go over it with the hoover to get as much as you possibly can out of it. So what I've done is I took the bed, turned it around and gave it a tap, and there was quite a few granules of the sponge went onto my table. So I've got a good majority of them out now by doing that. There's just a few left here, and then certain bits where it's quite oily. So what I'm going to try and do is use a dry cotton bud and just get in and just twist it like that to see. Yeah. I've speeded this up because it took me quite a while. I would say to allow for an afternoon or an evening to clean and replace the sponge bar. So I've cleaned there as best I can. I've used lots of cotton buds and kitchen roll, and I've also turned it over and tapped it a couple of times as well, and then wiped my table. So the sponge that I'm using today, it has one side that has the backing and the rest is all open sponge. So the way the old sponge was it had this backing at the top here. So I'm just going to place this along now in position, and I'm going to extend it a couple of centimetres just the way it was. And this sponge that I've bought seems to be just the right size. It just fits nicely. So turn the bed and put the needles in, leaving a gap of 4 or 5 between each needle we're putting it in. I'm also wiping it there, so there's any residue, oil or dirt, I'm wiping it off. You see here, I'm showing you have to open the latch this time when you're putting the needle back in. So you're doing a stabbing motion downwards. You have your opposite hand underneath feeling for the needle. So you use that stabbing motion downwards with the latch open. And what you'll do is you'll feel it coming, you'll feel the needle coming through. And then what you do is you use your index finger and you press against the sponge. I'm showing you the upside down view here so you can see what I'm doing. So you use your index finger to press on the sponge. This means the needle ends up going horizontal, and you can then push it through into position. So the sponge bar left some sticky residue, so here I'm just wiping it off. And here I'm just looking to see how the sponge bar is, and I'm just pushing it into place as well. The sponge bar is just the right size and the right consistency. So the next stage is, before I put the metal plate back on, I'm just wiping down all the little granules of the old sponge bar, and that took a little while to do. So now the next stage is to put the metal plate on and put all the screws in. I do that a bit at a time. I don't tighten them all the way. I just put the plate over and then tighten them a little bit at a time and move the plate around so they're all in the right position. After all the screws were in and I turned it round, one of the end plates wasn't straight, so I turned the machine back over and I tightened a couple of screws, and then it was in the right position. Now the sponge bar's been replaced, the needles won't slide out of position when you hold the machine up, whereas they did before the sponge bar was replaced. Now the machine will knit a lot better and the stitches will knit correctly with no issues with drop stitches, etc.